In 20 years of teaching my version of healthcare self-defense, there's one thing that I found in my research, and that is that nobody on the planet has to face what a healthcare provider does when it comes to workplace violence. I'm Teitsort, and we're going to discuss that in this episode of Chronicles of a Culture Changer. In EMT, first responder, EMR, or paramedic school, the first couple of pages, they talk about BSI and scene safe. Then as the student goes through their training, they always have to say this mantra of BSI for body substance isolation, protecting from communicable diseases, and then they throw up a scene safe. Well, if the participant isn't wearing their gloves, they'll fail them. But my question to those educators is, when was the last time you really challenged them on their scene safety? The flip side of the danger of that is, if you challenge them on the scene safety, no test should ever be a surprise. So have you prepared them recently for what they face on the job? Now, in nursing, it's even worse because they get nothing. We didn't even understand this until we had been teaching nurses for several years, that they get nothing about the fact that, you're important, your safety is important when it comes to violence. I'll give you an example. One of the people that recently had attended one of our classes tells me about how, as a traveling RN, she was in, California. And they said, look, if an earthquake hits, dive under those steel, tables. They're the strongest thing that we have in here. And, don't worry about the patients. You've got to get safe first. And then I asked the nurse the question. I said, well, did they ever say anything that if you were being attacked and beat up and, anything about your safety there? And they're like, no. Okay, we're going to continue to talk about why that's such an issue. Blurred lines. What is the issue with blurred lines? Since no one has taught the healthcare provider what to do, if they're faced with any type of a use of force encounter, meaning self-defense or patient restraint, that they did what they thought was right, which is by watching the police. So they saw the police officer do a specific skill or a technique, then they mimic them. Well, here's how this becomes a vicious cycle. So the police officer then looks at the paramedic, the nurse, and the ER, however it may play out, doing the same skill that they are. So the police officer thinks subconsciously, wow, they must be trained like us. Where the truth is, they're not. The next part is the person that they're holding down, particularly if it's an intoxicated or a drugged individual, looks at the police officer, looks at the nurse, and then assumes, hey, we must be on the same page. So blurred lines, custody versus care. That's one issue there. Another problem we see in healthcare that makes it unique is that varied backgrounds. You can get nurses or paramedics, EMTs, techs, all these different people within a healthcare environment that have a varied background. Some may have been boxers in their early days. Some may have been, wrestlers. Some are MMA fighters, martial artists, military, former law enforcement. So all these different type of backgrounds have found their place in medicine. Well, if you don't give them what we're supposed to be doing in medicine, people will respond to a use of force encounter based upon their previous training and experience. It's humans, it's what we do. Which brings us to unofficial training. Unofficial training is that stuff that goes on around like the water cooler. And nowhere is this worse than when it feeds out through the media via social media and movies, things like that. So what happens is something occurs. And immediately people jump on and say, well, I would just do this and I'd just do that. I'd stomp their face, I'd kick them in the balls, I'd just do whatever. Well, here's the problem. Because the situation is so unique, meaning not another single person on the planet, meaning a policeman doesn't have to go, am I dealing with a confused patient or am I dealing with a criminal? A person walking in a park doesn't go, am I dealing with oh, wait, before you choke me, Mr. Bad Guy, are you really a diabetic, or do you have a head injury? So see, no one else has to differentiate like healthcare does in a moment's notice, am I dealing with a patient or an attacker? So see, that's the main thing that makes it so unique. And then you have all the issues that go around with that. And since I brought up the choke, and it's happened again, if you just look at our assault on staff logs, you will see how frequent the choke actually occurs. Some form of choking action, whether it be with one hand, two hands, from the front, from the back, to a healthcare provider, even using a stethoscope to choke a provider. But we have had countless reports of it actually occurring. So here's the danger in technique alone, and why technique alone can send you to jail or the unemployment line, both. Again, God forbid, a person who really wants to help their fellow man or woman, act spontaneously when they're faced with aggression, and then we fire them or charge them criminally for doing something that was like that. Here's what I mean. We have actually had issues in medicine where providers have been choked, whether by one hand or two hand, and the provider either being, beaten severely, or worse, the provider beating up somebody because nobody said the difference in a technique. So let's say you have a person who was a boxer or an MMA fighter, and in the back of an ambulance, without options, in the back of an ambulance or in an emergency room, a person reaches forward and grabs them by the throat. So the MMA fighter then begins to punch them in the face and maybe puts them to sleep or does whatever. Here's the issue. The part that I didn't say to you is the person was an 85-year-old confused nursing home patient who grabbed the provider. So when you see it like this, when you think about it, your brain is, well, if they're choking me, I'm going to punch them dead in the face. Here's the problem. Man, if you don't think about it like this, could a confused head injury person, septic, hypoxic, hypovolemic, or a diabetic who's hypoglycemic, reach out and grab a healthcare provider, a male, a female, it doesn't matter how you play it out, could they reach out and grab that provider with that one hand or two hands identically the same way a person who is high on a drug or intoxicated by alcohol reaches forward and grabs that provider? You have to answer yes. So this is what makes healthcare unique. No one else, not a policeman. I can tell you, as a policeman, if you touched me, I responded. We had the whole ask, tell, make. You don't get that in healthcare. If you're a person, and I'm teaching self-defense, and I'm, in my martial arts school or whatever, and we're talking about a person who's being accosted, either raped, robbed, mugged, however you wanted to play it out, that person doesn't have to differentiate between patient or aggressor. So a police officer doesn't, a woman walking in a park doesn't, two guys outside of a bar don't have to differentiate. So healthcare provider workplace violence sucks. No one else has to deal with it the way that the healthcare profession does. And so this putting the Band-Aid on by meaning, well, we'll hire just, this guy over here, that guy over there, is dangerous. Because if you don't provide the people the correct answers for what they're supposed to deal with, all they have to say when it ends up bad is go, nobody told me I could, nobody told me I couldn't, and it's an issue. So for 20 years we've been trying to scream, that there's a problem with violence. For about the first 8 or 10 years, I was saying the wrong message. I was still teaching people how to win a fight. In healthcare, man, oh man, we should never be in a fight on the job. You're either defending yourself or you're using medical restraints, restraining a patient using a recognized form of medical treatment. Guys, I'm telling you, this gray area is killing us. And all you got to do is we share it with you. We show you what happens when people use force inappropriately, either excessive or too little. So we've got a whole section devoted to where our staff are being attacked, and we have a whole section showing where the pendulum swings way far in the opposite direction and our people are using excessive force. So what I'm trying to leave you with today, self-defense in healthcare, dealing with workplace violence sucks. No one else has to deal with what a healthcare provider has to deal with. And I'm telling you, we bring the outside stuff in, and if you're not using mission-specific material, whether you use DT for EMS or not, that's your business. But what I am sharing with you is this. Please make sure your people are training for all 4 areas. That's mind, street, media, courts, and protecting themselves in all 4 areas when it comes to the use of force, for workplace violence in medicine. I'm Teitsort. Thanks for watching this episode of Chronicles of a Culture Changer. We'll see you soon.